Hey guys, tonight we're starting with something fragrant, but not in a good way. Imagine a palace filled with gold silk diamonds and an unmistakable whiff of something that smells suspiciously like damp cheese and yesterday's socks. That's right. Tonight you're living like a royal woman to be exact. And here's the twist. You haven't bathed in weeks, maybe months, possibly ever. You're draped in embroidered gowns and crowned in glittering gems, but you also carry the pungent aura of someone who thinks soap is a suspicious foreign concept. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing this sleepy little history club span the globe. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're in a castle in 16th century France. Your room is massive cold and echoey with stained glass windows that filter morning light through centuries of soot. The stone floor sucks warmth from your slippers, and tapestries hang on every wall not for decoration, but to keep the wind from howling through every crack. A maid is brushing your hair. That sounds nice until you realize she's combing through several days of powdered sweat perfume and whatever else you've collected while walking through dusty halls, sitting on dusty chairs, and hosting dusty dukes. And no, you're not hopping into a hot bubble bath after. You're not hopping into anything that involves water, because brace yourself, you don't actually bathe. At least not the way we think of bathing. You might wipe your face with a damp cloth. You might soak your feet if there's an audience and a ceremonial reason. But a full bath, that's seen as either indulgent, dangerous, or just plain weird. You see, for much of medieval and early modern history, water was considered suspicious. Physicians, those medieval geniuses who thought bleeding you with leeches was solid science, believed that hot water opened your skin's pores to evil humors and diseases. They weren't entirely wrong about the germs, just wildly off about how they worked. So instead of bathing royalty layered on perfumes powders and more fabric, a lot more fabric, you didn't wash your body. You covered it in lace and hoped no one noticed. Which brings us to our first sensory treat, the royal armpit. Imagine a heavy velvet gown with brocade sleeves tight enough to cut off circulation. You're wearing 3 underskirts, a corset, and a long-sleeved shift made of wool. The court is stuffy, the fire's going. You've been dancing, and you've also been fermenting under all those layers for 6 hours. Congratulations, you're now marinating like a soft cheese wrapped in upholstery. And because nobody is bathing, the entire court smells vaguely of onions, mildew, and desperation. You'd think someone would notice. They did. They just thought it was normal. The Queen of Spain supposedly bragged that she'd only bathed twice in her life, once at birth and once on her wedding day. Romantic rite. Historians still argue whether that particular claim was exaggerated, but the general trend, very real. Some queens bathed quarterly, some preferred annual dips, and some just never did. That wasn't neglect. That was etiquette. To compensate, royal women developed complex perfume rituals. Rose water, orange blossom essence, musk, ambergris, the good stuff. Expensive imported, often made from crushed flowers, or occasionally crushed animals. Fun side note, ambergris. One of the most prized ingredients is whale vomit. Yes, vomit. From whales, collected floating in the ocean, and sold for its sweet, earthy aroma. Who said elegance had limits? So you start your day not with a shower, but with a spritz of something pungent and floral that battles bravely against the fortress of stale sweat underneath. Your ladies-in-waiting help you dress, which is less like getting ready and more like being gift-wrapped in fabrics that haven't seen soap since the tailor hemmed them. The dress you wear today, it's the same one you wore last week, possibly the same one you'll wear tomorrow. Laundering is a luxury, especially for heavy embroidered pieces that can't just be tossed into a river without risking a wardrobe tragedy. Underneath it all, linen shifts, the only layer that might get washed more than once a month. These shifts serve as sweat catchers' grime barriers and the medieval version of Febreze, in theory. In practice, they absorb everything and begin their slow transformation into relics of questionable hygiene. And the worst part, you're the clean one. Compared to your subjects who might go their entire lives without a single proper bath, you're practically sparkling. But let's say you do decide to wash. Maybe it's Coronation Day, or the Pope is visiting, or your mother-in-law died and the funeral is in full swing. The palace draws a hot bath carefully carried in by servants, poured into a massive wooden tub lined with linen and rose petals. You sit in it for a grand total of 5 minutes. You don't scrub. You just steep like an aristocratic teabag. Then you get out towel off with something that probably smells worse than you do, and go back to pretending personal hygiene is beneath you. Of course, there are exceptions. Queen Elizabeth I of England reportedly bathed monthly, whether she needed it or not. This makes her something of a hygiene innovator. Though let's not give her too much credit, she also wore white lead makeup that slowly poisoned her skin. But more on that in a later section. The royal stink wasn't just tolerated, it was part of the aesthetic. People associated bathing with sin indulgence, or worse, the lower classes. Public bathhouses were for merchants, prostitutes, and suspiciously clean commoners. For a proper lady, hygiene was about appearances, not odor. So long as your skin was powdered, your cheeks rosy, and your gown voluminous, you could carry on smelling like a 3-week-old bouquet in a vase of stagnant water. And thus you glide through your day, gracefully ignoring the sweat pooling under your ruff and the itchy places under your corset. You wave at nobles, flirt with courtiers, and attend long feasts where the smell of roast boar just barely masks the body odor wafting down the table. Royal elegance, you see, is all about confidence. And maybe not breathing through your nose. You're still perched on your ornate chair, drenched in perfume and prayer, when the second worst part of royal hygiene makes itself known, the daily avoidance of anything resembling an actual bath. Because why touch water when you can just drown yourself in rose oil and pretend royal women, especially in the high courts of France, England, and the Habsburg Empire, didn't just ignore bathing, they actively replaced it with dry cleaning for humans. You're handed a cloth dampened with orange blossom water and instructed to gently pat, not scrub, your neck and wrists. That's it. That's your full body cleanse for the day. Congratulations, you're now both dehydrated and still filthy. And now comes the royal ritual of scent layering. Think of it like a medieval beauty influencer's routine, except instead of serums and moisturizers, you've got a sequence of floral waters, powdered herbs, and a musky animal extract that smells like a spice merchant fell into a bear's den. The goal isn't freshness. The goal is distraction. You're not actually clean, you're just more interestingly smelly. Your first layer is violet water dabbed onto your temples to clear the humors. Then comes rose oil massaged into your pulse points until your skin glistens like a well-oiled roast. Finally, someone hands you a sachet filled with dried lavender and cloves, which you tuck into your bodice like a historical air freshener. And this is before breakfast. The entire philosophy behind this routine is that cleanliness is a matter of scent and status. If you smell like expensive flowers, you must be refined. If you smell like actual soap and water, you might be a laundress or worse French. Historians still argue whether this anti-bathing attitude came more from medical fear, religious modesty, or sheer aristocratic laziness. Spoiler, it was probably all three. Let's talk about those perfumes for a moment. In an age where indoor plumbing didn't exist, and natural deodorant meant rubbing your armpits with crushed mint leaves, royal women relied on perfume, like a knight relied on armor. Strong, constant, and sometimes hazardous to your health. Many perfumes of the era were alcohol-based tinctures steeped with herbs, flowers, and spices if you were lucky. If not, you might find your bottle laced with civet musk squeezed from the scent glands of civet cats' castoreum, a substance scraped from a beaver's behind, or ambergris, the aforementioned whale vomit. All highly prized, all deeply unpleasant, and all worn with pride. Your dressing chamber smells like a potpourri shop got into a bar fight with a spice rack. You could be knocked out by the scent of yourself. And yet somehow this is preferable to being caught with a whiff of honest-to-goodness body odor. Because remember, to sweat was to admit you had a body. And in the world of royal women, your body was a vessel for beauty, not biology. But while the perfumes masked your skin, they did little for your hair. Haircare in the royal court was a whole different disaster. Washing your hair with water was considered dangerous again. Those open pores were just too risky. So instead, your maid brushes it daily, relentlessly, with boar bristle brushes and a dash of flower oil. She might sprinkle lavender or crushed rosemary into the scalp to freshen it, but really, you're just packing scented grime into a stylish updo. If your scalp itches, well, that's the price of nobility. Lice, dandruff, and occasional scalp boils were as much a part of life as corsets and uncomfortable chairs. Sometimes powdered wigs helped. Sometimes they made it worse, but we'll save the full nightmare of wigs for another section. Just know that for now, your real hair is a semi-sentient crown of grease and petals. Let's not forget your garments. Your undergarments are technically clean, which in this case means they've been worn fewer than 5 times. Your chemise, that linen shift against your skin, absorbs all the sweat your body refuses to release through a bath. It's yellowed under the arms and stiff at the collar. It smells like anxiety and potpourri, but it's better than nothing. Once dressed, you shuffle through your marble corridors and prepare to host visitors. And this is where the stench diplomacy begins. You sit in salons perfumed with burning incense and orange peel. You fan yourself not just for elegance, but to waft fresh air directly into your own face. Your guests follow the same regimen everyone in the room is actively decomposing beneath their gowns, but at least you're all equally aromatic. And yet things can still go wrong. Court gossip is brutal. If your perfume is too strong, people whisper that you're hiding disease. Too weak, and they assume you're hiding filth. Choose the wrong scent family, and someone might spread rumors that you smell like fish, or worse, peasant stew. So you stick with florals. You stick with musk. You stick with your nose held high and your pores tightly shut. Because water, that's for fountains and fish, not duchesses. Your rare attempts at proper washing, say if you've just given birth or narrowly survived plague, are carefully supervised affairs. Water is heated, Rose petals are added, and a priest may be summoned to bless the tub. You bathe fully clothed or behind a privacy screen, and you dry off with a linen towel so rough it could double as sandpaper. You emerge refreshed briefly, but mostly you feel damp and a little vulnerable. You quickly reapply your perfume's redress in heavy silks and pretend the bath never happened. Because cleanliness might be next to godliness, but in your world, it's also dangerously close to scandal. You're seated in front of your mirror now, a towering gilded monstrosity warped by age and cloudy from the smoke of beeswax candles. A lady-in-waiting stands beside you with a silver tray, and on it, a thick paste the color of sour milk, a tiny brush made from goose feathers, and a smell that could fell a small ox. Welcome to the royal skincare routine. Step 1. Apply a generous coat of lead-based foundation directly to your face. Yes, lead. The same substance now banned in paint's pipes and anything meant to touch living skin. In the 16th and 17th centuries, it was all the rage in court. Known as Venetian ceruse, this cosmetic concoction was a mix of white lead and vinegar whipped into a creamy paste that promised a flawless porcelain complexion. Smooth, pale, deadly. You grimace slightly as it's dabbed on. The lead stings your open pores, remember you haven't washed in days, and settles into every fine line like cement in a cobblestone street. The result is ghostly and regal. The cost open sores, facial swelling, hair loss, and eventual kidney failure. But beauty is pain, especially royal beauty. Historians still argue whether Elizabeth III's famously white face was due to early adoption of lead-based makeup or just a very committed skincare nightmare. But records agree she reapplied ceruse daily to cover up scarring and blemishes caused by smallpox and, ironically, by the lead itself. It's a vicious cosmetic circle, and you're right in the middle of it. And it doesn't stop with foundation. There's also vermilion, a vivid red pigment made from mercury sulfide. It's used for blush and lip tint. You apply it gently to your cheeks, then your mouth, creating a pop of color against the chalky white of your skin. The effect is striking. Also, toxic. Over time, mercury causes tremors, depression, and hallucinations. Basically, the more beautiful you become, the more likely you are to forget your own name or start seeing ghosts in the tapestries. But you're a queen, a duchess, a countess with a reputation to uphold. No one wants to look healthy and vigorous. That's for farmers and milkmaids. You're aiming for fragile ethereal and possibly on death's doorstep. A look that whispers, I've never plowed a field, and I might faint before dessert. To keep the illusion intact, you avoid the sun like it's carrying the plague. A tan implies labor implies poverty, and poverty implies bad breeding. So you spend your days indoors, away from sunlight, surrounded by thick curtains and thicker powders. Your face is a carefully sculpted mask, and it must never crack. Unfortunately, that mask also traps every speck of dirt, sweat, and bacteria. Without proper cleansing, or any cleansing, your skin becomes a battlefield. Boils, rashes, blackheads that could map constellations. You treat these the same way. You treat everything else with more powder, more perfume, more denial. Your eyebrows, probably plucked clean off. That was the style for many centuries, believe it or not. High foreheads were considered regal and intelligent, so women shaved or waxed their hairline and brows into oblivion. Then they'd pencil them back on with soot or mouse hair brushes. If you're lucky, you'll use actual cosmetics. If not, maybe a burnt cork stub from last night's banquet. Very versatile. very flammable. Sometimes, if your brows are too patchy, a maid might offer you false brows made from mouse pelts. That's right, tiny strips of mouse skin, cut and shaped, then glued just above your eyes. They don't move. They don't match your hair. And sometimes they fall off mid-conversation. But hey, fashion waits for no rodent. Now let's talk eyeliner. Kohl, galena, and charcoal were common across centuries and regions. They accentuate your eyes and give you that hollow-cheeked fever dream glow so adored by medieval poets. But you don't just apply it to look pretty. It's believed to ward off the evil eye. And also dust, and sun, and possibly marriage proposals. If you're lucky, your cosmetics came from an apothecary with some idea of quality control. If not, they came from your lady-in-waiting's cousin, who swears the beetle powder makes your eyes pop. Spoiler, it also makes your eyelids swell shut. But the redness is very striking. And yet somehow, despite the pain, the irritation, and the clear medical warning signs radiating from your own reflection, you feel powerful, beautiful, unapproachable. That's the goal after all. You aren't meant to look human. You're meant to look royal. When night finally falls, you don't remove your makeup. There's no cold cream, no micellar water, no cute reusable cotton pads. You sleep in full face because removing it risks pulling at the skin or smudging your eyebrows. And besides, there's a banquet tomorrow. Why waste time washing your face when you can just layer on more? The result, your pillowcase, is a crime scene. Streaks of red, patches of white, the faint glimmer of powdered arsenic. The mattress underneath is probably older than your youngest child and smells like every cosmetic you've ever worn, all fermented into one weird musky time capsule. And the next morning, you do it all over again. Because to be a royal woman isn't just about court politics or etiquette. It's about endurance. Endurance of lead-mercury rat hair eyebrows and the quiet, persistent knowledge that your face is slowly, but surely, killing you. But you look fabulous doing it. The morning starts as usual before the roosters even have a chance to wake up. Your mouth already tastes like a bouquet of regret. Not that brushing your teeth will fix it. Because here's the royal truth. Dental hygiene in your gilded world is decorative at best and actively horrifying at worst. You're sitting up right now on a cushioned stool clutching a silver goblet of watered-down rose syrup to mask your breath. It helps. A little. But what you really need is a toothbrush. Too bad those haven't quite become standard yet. What you have instead is a thin twig, maybe frayed on one end, or a linen cloth dipped in vinegar and salt. You rub the cloth across your teeth, trying not to gag on the taste. The vinegar burns. The salt grits. The cloth itself is stiff and crusted from previous uses. Because why waste perfectly good linen? You scrub as gently as possible because your gums are bleeding already, and one loose tooth could mean a week of royal silence, not out of humility, but out of pain. And here's the kicker. Even if you do brush, the result is cosmetic. You're not fighting cavities. You're just polishing off yesterday's roast swan and sugared plums. Your teeth are already yellow cracked or missing entirely, but you smile anyway. Royals are expected to be radiant after all, even when their smiles look like poorly maintained ruins from the last crusade. Historical records from Europe to Persia show that even queens and empresses had serious tooth decay. Catherine de' Medici, Queen of France, was said to have reeked of bad breath so severely that courtiers avoided standing too close. Some sources even claim she regularly chewed cloves, not for freshness, but to mask the rot. And it wasn't just bad teeth, it was what came after. Because when a tooth went bad, and it always did, you didn't call a dentist. You called a barber surgeon. He'd arrive with a metal instrument that looked more like a torture device than medical equipment. No anesthesia, no sterilization, just one big yank and a prayer you wouldn't pass out or punch him. You might think false teeth were a solution. And yes, some royal women did wear dentures, but not the nice kind. Picture this, a mouthful of human teeth, animal teeth, or ivory carved and jammed into a metal frame. George Washington's wooden teeth get all the fame, but noble women's dentures were often stitched together with gold wire and goat molars. If you were lucky, they fit. If not well, at least they made your cheeks look fuller, and they stank. No one knew how to clean them. Some women simply removed them for meals and then reinserted them with beeswax or paste. Others left them, impermanently resulting in a slow, damp rot that clung to their breath like a haunting. Let's also talk about tooth paint. Yes, you read that right. In some Eastern courts, particularly in Japan and Southeast Asia, it was fashionable for aristocratic women to blacken their teeth with a mixture of iron filings, vinegar, and tannins. Called ohaguro, it was considered beautiful, even erotic. A woman with blackened teeth showed refinement, wealth, and status. And while that trend never caught on in the West, don't be smug. Western royals did the same thing, just unintentionally. Their diets were high in sugar, thanks to colonial trade and royal indulgence, and that meant decay came fast. Black teeth became so common they were considered normal. Queen Elizabeth I's smile was famously described as black as ink, and no one dared question it. Because if the Queen had black teeth, then clearly that was fashionable. Right. And what about the tongue? No one ever talks about the tongue. It's coated. It smells. You might scrape it with a stick or dab it with mint oil, but mostly it's left to fester in its own medieval ecosystem. Combined with a throat constantly inflamed from smoky halls and cold stone palaces, it gives your breath the subtle charm of damp velvet and regret. You try not to open your mouth too wide when you speak. You breathe through your nose when possible. But even that has its risks, because when your teeth rot, so do your gums, and infections creep upward. Some noble women died not from war or poison, but from untreated dental abscesses that spread to their brain. A slow, painful death, made worse by the fact that you were probably wearing pearls and a 12-pound wig the whole time. There were remedies, of course. Most of them awful. Rinsing with urine was one. Brushing with crushed bones, ashes, or even soot was another. Some apothecaries sold mouthwashes made with vinegar and crushed pearls, which sounds elegant until you realize it's about as effective as gargling sand. And don't even ask about the myth that rabbit brains cured toothaches. Let's just say desperate times, harebrained solutions. Historians still debate whether royal women genuinely believed in these cures, or if they were simply too afraid to question tradition. After all, if your mother used burnt rosemary and alum to harden the enamel, who were you to argue? Especially when your options were limited to a grin and bear it B, yank it out, or C, die quietly in a scented room while courtiers speculated about your love life. And yet through it all, the royal smile endured. Painted portraits often showed closed lips or gentle smirks. Not because subtlety was fashionable, but because opening your mouth revealed the truth. Behind every crown, behind every velvet veil, was a mouthful of misery masquerading as majesty. So you sip your rose water, you chew a clove, you press a lace handkerchief to your lips and nod regally. Because you are a queen. Your teeth may be falling out, your gums may bleed every morning, but your posture is perfect. Your pearls are polished, and your legacy, however breathy, will be preserved in oil paint and courtly poetry. Just maybe not too close to the viewer's nose. You're seated on your silken cushions, your lead-painted face glowing softly in the flicker of firelight when nature comes calling. But here's the royal reality: even queens have periods. And in an age without plumbing pads or privacy, the experience was far from majestic. Let's start with the tools, or rather the lack thereof. Medieval and early modern royalty didn't have tampons, sanitary pads, or menstrual cups. What they had was ingenuity, awkwardness, and a deep cultural discomfort with the female body. Your choices: folded linen rags, wool-stuffed cloth pads, or nothing at all. And that's if you even acknowledged menstruation existed. Many royal women simply did not speak of it. The body was meant to be mysterious, and menstruation, although normal, was considered impure, embarrassing, and borderline sinful. You're handed a thick square of linen by your maid. It's been boiled. Probably. Maybe. It's tied with a string and fastened to a simple belt, which you wear under layers of gowns and petticoats. Once in place, it doesn't feel secure. Because it isn't. You walk like you're balancing a jug of wine on your hips, terrified every step might trigger a wardrobe catastrophe. To hide any accidents, royal women relied on layers, chemises, underskirts, petticoats, and long gowns. Dark fabrics were preferred. Red silk, in particular, wasn't just luxurious. It was strategic. It masked leaks better than pale brocade. And if all else failed, you simply did not sit down in public for the day. Or you stayed in bed, citing delicacy or nerves. Not that anyone believed that, but no one dared ask more. Historians still debate whether the custom of seclusion during menses was a personal choice or a cultural cage. In some eras and regions, women were instructed to rest during their period. In others, they were expected to carry on as normal so long as they didn't bleed onto the furniture. That was the line. Furniture. And the smell. Well, without modern hygiene products, things got pungent quickly. Royal chambers already stank of sweat lead and lavender. Add a dash of iron-rich blood, and suddenly the rose water doesn't quite cut it. So what did royal women do? They stuffed their bodices with fragrant herbs, lavender, rosemary, mint. Some even tied sachets around their thighs. You're basically a walking spice rack, masking what your body insists on revealing. Of course, menstruation wasn't just a hygiene issue. It was political. If you were a queen or princess, your period meant you were still fertile, still capable of producing heirs. That mattered immensely. So much so that royal physicians tracked your cycles with unsettling enthusiasm. Miss a month, expect questions. Miss 2, expect a priest and a midwife and about 30 whispering ladies in waiting. Pregnancy wasn't announced with glowing photos and floral captions. It was detected through period absence and symptoms like nausea, swelling, or weird cravings. And if you were unlucky, your period might return with devastating implications. Miscarriages were common, often fatal, always traumatic. And yet you smiled, you waved, you hosted banquets while bleeding and prayed no one noticed the stains. One bizarre remedy for menstrual irregularity involved applying leeches. Yes, leeches. Some medical texts recommended placing them near the groin to balance the humors. Others suggested bloodletting from the ankle because clearly If your womb was unhappy, you should bleed from the opposite end of your body. Medieval logic. Then there were the perfumes. Some noble women were instructed to sniff specific herbs or spices during menstruation to calm the wandering womb. A real diagnosis, by the way. The uterus, they believed, could float around the body and cause chaos if not properly weighed down by a pregnancy. So you're not just bleeding, you're also fighting an invisible organ rebellion. How delightful. For cramps, you might be given chamomile tea, or warm stones, or, if your physician was particularly experimental, a dose of crushed opium and wine. Pain relief wasn't consistent, and suffering was often seen as virtuous. After all, Eve sinned. Childbirth and menstruation were your penance. Congratulations on your biblical inheritance. And the mess. Let's just say royal laundresses earned every miserable coin. Menstrual cloths were soaked in vinegar boiled and hung to dry in private corners of the castle. If they couldn't be cleaned properly, they were burned. Because nothing said luxury like a small fire dedicated to uterine inconvenience. Some queens preferred to go without protection altogether. Free bleeding, not as a feminist statement, but as a resigned shrug, with layers of clothing and long chairs covered in tapestries. It was sometimes easier to just bleed and move on. The servants would handle it. After all, they always did. And let's not forget postpartum hygiene. After giving birth, women were considered unclean for up to 40 days. They were often confined to a special room known as the lying-in chamber, where they rested healed and continued bleeding in peace. The chamber was warm, dim, and heavily perfumed. Visitors brought gifts and prayers and occasionally jars of wine spiked with herbs to dry the womb. Whether it helped or not is still debatable. What's not debatable is the smell. That room had its own atmosphere. But through all of this, the cramps, the leaks, the shame, the mess, you're still expected to be graceful, regal, untouched by bodily functions. You speak softly. You glide across floors. You smile and sip tea while a linen belt full of wool pads rubs against your thighs. Because royalty isn't about feeling good. It's about looking good, even when your body is staging a small revolution. And if you can do it while wearing 40 pounds of fabric and not bleeding on the velvet chaise, you, my lady, are doing just fine. You're back at the mirror, but now your attention turns skyward, or rather, scalpward. A maid approaches with a heavy hatbox-shaped container. She opens it with reverence, as if revealing a sacred relic. Inside, not a crown, not a halo, but something just as important to a royal woman's image. A wig. But don't picture the sleek synthetic kind you buy online, or the perfectly waved marvels from movie sets. No, this is a towering mass of human hair, horsehair ribbons, and mystery. It smells faintly of powdered lavender, faintly of musty feathers, and overwhelmingly of something that once lived. Possibly still does. You lift it delicately. It's heavier than it looks. Dense. Warm. You're about to strap it onto your already oily, itchy head, like a helmet of fashion doom. Welcome to the age of aristocratic wigs, the haute couture beehives of the centuries. Wigs weren't just accessories. They were armor. They declared status, style, and sometimes marital availability. In Versailles, height mattered. The higher the hair, the closer to heaven or the court's approval. Marie Antoinette famously wore wigs several feet tall, adorned with miniature ships, birds, and gardens. Yes, actual ships. Historians still argue whether the ship in the hair trend started with a naval victory or a royal dare. Either way, it floated into fashion and never quite sailed out. Beneath the wig, your real hair is plaited tightly to the scalp. No washing beforehand, of course. Why disrupt the rich patina of scalp oil and stale perfume that's been cultivating for weeks? Your hair is slicked back with pomade made from pig fat and scented wax. It's sticky. It attracts dust. It also attracts lice. Lice, you see, loved wigs. Wigs were warm. Wigs were private. Wigs were made of hair and never ever cleaned. Once they became infested, and they always did, the little critters simply moved in. You scratch discreetly. You can't tell if it's your scalp or the wig colony doing the crawling. Royal women developed coping mechanisms. You dust your wig with powder typically made from starch, sometimes mixed with crushed lavender iris root or even ground bone. This isn't just for color. It's to suffocate the lice, a sort of pest control via fashion. But the powder comes with its own issues. It clings to your gown. It chokes the air. You inhale a fine mist of it every morning, and your maid develops a cough that's half allergy, half regret. You've heard rumors of powdered wigs catching fire from open candle flames, but you tell yourself that's just court gossip. Probably. The bigger your social ambition, the bigger your wig. One duchess wears a powdered tower so tall she has to duck through doorways. Another conceals secret pockets inside her wig for love letters or sweets. One queen allegedly had a tiny bird cage woven into her updo. The bird real. The poop also real. And washing, forget it. Wigs were never cleaned in the modern sense. If they got truly vile, you sent them to a wig maker who might soak them in vinegar or brace yourself urine. Yes, human urine. The ammonia helped refresh the fibers, or so they said. You were just glad not to handle the process yourself. Sometimes, if you were especially unlucky, you skipped the wig altogether and powdered your own hair. That meant applying thick paste directly to your roots, then caking on white powder until your head resembled a badly baked meringue. And then you'd style it, high rigid and hairsprayed with stiffening agents like egg whites resin or fish glue. Fish glue. Imagine the scent after a warm day of dancing. Now imagine sleeping with that on your head. Because here's the worst part: the wigs didn't come off at night. Often you slept in them, or at least in tightly pinned hair preparations that would survive the apocalypse. You lay your head down gingerly, hoping not to crush the arrangement. Your pillow becomes a dusty perfume sponge. You wake up sore, powdered, and still crawling. Your scalp itches, always. You pick scratch pat and pretend. You ask your maid to check for redness. She lies. It's fine, she says. Everyone's scalp smells like pickled starch and defeat. Then there's the heat. Wigs are insulating. Add a corset layers of fabric and a crowded ballroom lit with fire, and you're basically poaching. Your forehead beads with sweat, which drips into your eyes, mixing with coal and powder until your vision blurs and your tears smell like nutmeg. At court, you can't admit any of this. To remove your wig in public is scandalous. To scratch too, obviously impolite. You smile. You wave. You incline. Your ridiculous, itchy head. And yet this ritual continues for generations. Because wigs aren't just about beauty. They're about authority. The higher your hair, the higher your rank. And no one questions the queen with the 4-foot beehive filled with ostrich feathers and ambition. Eventually, wig trends begin to shift. The late 18th century brings natural hairstyles back into fashion, but even these are curled, pomaded, and powdered into oblivion. Nothing is truly simple. Even simplicity is elaborate. And you just want to take the thing off and run into a lake. But lakes are cold, lakes are dangerous, and you've still got a dinner with 3 dukes and a diplomat who thinks your wig signals willingness. So you lift your chin, you scratch the nape of your neck when no one's looking, and you endure. Because while your wig might be a nest of lice and lies, it's also your crown. And in this world, crowns don't come off, not even at bedtime. It's early afternoon now, and the sun has climbed just high enough to spotlight another baffling entry in the Royal Hygiene archives. You've endured the wigs, the powder, the stained linens. But now we enter the truly surreal skincare by Urine. Yes, we're going there. You're in your private chamber, and your maid brings you a small ceramic jar, delicately painted, sealed with wax. You already know what's inside. A blend that supposedly restores your complexion, softens your skin, and banishes blemishes. Its main ingredient, aged human urine. Not just any urine, mind you, ideally from a healthy child or young woman. The fresher the better. But some recipes recommend letting it sit until the scent becomes medicinal. Historians still argue whether this was based on flawed medical theory or sheer desperation for clear skin. Either way, you're about to splash pee on your face. You dip a linen cloth into the jar and gently pat it across your cheeks. The smell is sharp, earthy, and unmistakably ammonia-rich. It burns a little. Not enough to scream, just enough to question all your life decisions. You try not to gag. After all, this was recommended by your physician who wears feathers in his hat and believes sneezing cures melancholy. Urine, they claim, opens the pores, removes spots, and evens the complexion. It's also cheap, readily available, and blessedly sterile when fresh. Even noble women with access to rose oil and crushed pearl face scrubs sometimes kept a secret bottle of Eau de Urine tucked behind their powders, because they whispered it worked. But what about the results? Did it actually improve your skin? Maybe. Urine contains urea and ammonia, which can mildly exfoliate and kill bacteria. But it also irritates stinks and invites awkward explanations if someone walks in mid-application. So you get creative. Some recipes mix it with crushed herbs, eggshell powder, or goat's milk. Others infuse it with flower petals to make the scent less personal. One Italian princess allegedly masked the odor with cinnamon bark and cloves, because nothing says elegance like spicy bathroom science. And urine wasn't just for the face. Some royal beauty guides recommended urine-based foot soaks for cracked heels, or even hair rinses to combat lice. You haven't tried that yet, but let's be honest, you're considering it. Anything to beat the itch. It gets weirder. Some women believed urine could cure everything from freckles to plague. Others insisted it improved digestion. When consumed, yes, consumed. You politely decline. You're adventurous, not unhinged. But while today's section may sound extreme, it's important to remember that in a world without modern chemistry, anything with observable effects was fair game. Vinegar used for baths and vaginal rinses. Honey A wound treatment, urine. Well, it was warm, acidic, and endlessly available. A medieval multi-tool. Still, you can't help but sigh as you dab your cheeks with the warm cloth. You wonder what it must be like to have clear skin from just washing your face with water. But in your world, water is suspect. Remember, the doctors say it opens pores too much. Water causes illness. Bathing is fine for peasants and sailors. But for queens, urine is just sophisticated science. Of course, you never mention this in public. You don't stroll into court saying, "Good afternoon, Duke Haversham." I'm absolutely glowing with child pee. No, you say your glow is divine, a gift of noble blood, or Venetian ceruse, or if you're feeling cheeky, just the light bouncing off your diamonds. But the truth is marinating in a sealed jar on your dressing table, turning quietly into a 17th century face mask. You finish your routine by rubbing a bit of cold cream onto your neck, a blend of animal fat rose water and beeswax. It covers the smell slightly. You powder your face again. You dust your wig. You spritz yourself with ambergris, and you're ready to face the court. Do you feel clean? Not exactly. Do you feel powerful? Absolutely. Because every powdered noble in the hall is doing the same thing. Some with lavender rinse, some with snail slime. One duchess swears by sheep dung. Another claims to boil pigeon droppings into paste. You all reek, elegantly but unmistakably. Perfume and pee, musk and mildew, the scent of highborn ambition and poor dermatology. And yet, when the trumpets sound and your name is called, you glide into the ballroom like the goddess of grace herself. Your skin shines under the chandeliers. Your cheeks are rosy from a combination of blush light irritation and possibly embarrassment. But no one dares say a word. Because if you smell like urine, so does everyone else. You're finally seated for supper at a long oak table set with gold-trimmed plates, crystal goblets, and embroidered linens no one actually dares to wipe their mouths on. The candles flicker. Musicians pluck quietly in the background. A roast swan lies dramatically posed in the center of the table and next to you. A lady with eyebrows made of mouse fur. Yes, we've arrived at another regrettable royal beauty trend, pest-based accessories. Let's rewind. You're dressing earlier that afternoon, your face already powdered, your corset pulled so tight your spleen is negotiating a new lease. Your maid leans in, squints at your forehead, and announces that your eyebrows are looking a bit ghostly. She's right. You shaved or plucked them last week to maintain that fashionable blank canvas look, but now you're left with a couple of wispy stragglers and an expression that's halfway between confused and concussed. What's the fix, false brows? Not the kind you glue on with sleek applicators from a Paris boutique. No, these are handmade arcs of actual mouse hide cut into shape, dyed with soot, and stuck onto your brow bone with a mix of tree sap and silent despair. Historians still debate whether this practice was widespread or simply the unfortunate favorite of a few trend-setting lunatics. But evidence suggests it did happen, particularly in the 17th and early 18th centuries, when face powder turned eyebrows into endangered species. You needed something to fill the void, and apparently rodents volunteered. The process begins with the maid shaving the soft belly fur off a freshly caught mouse. It's then pressed flat cut into two vaguely symmetrical shapes and delicately arranged on a waxed parchment to set. Once dry, it's brushed lightly with charcoal or soot for definition, and sometimes dusted with powder so it wouldn't look too new. When it's time to apply, your brow is cleaned not with soap, heaven forbid, but with a dab of rose water, and maybe a pinch of vinegar to prepare the surface. The false brow is then warmed slightly and pressed into place. You're warned not to frown, or smile, or sweat, or sneeze, because these things are fragile. One wrong gust of wind, and your dignity is airborne. Once applied, they look plausible. From across the ballroom, in dim lighting, if no one blinks, some royal women took it further. They'd enhance the fur with tiny beads or threads of gold to reflect candlelight. Others shaped their brows into exaggerated arches, giving them an expression of constant surprise or simmering judgment. The effect was ethereal or ridiculous, depending on the angle. But it wasn't just about looks. Eyebrows carried meaning. High arches suggested nobility, intelligence, and divine favor. Thin brows whispered elegance. Thick ones, if you dared leave them natural, implied you were either scandalous or foreign. So, the mouse fur. It was safer than letting your real brows get you accused of being Slavic. Of course, mice weren't the only critters sacrificed to beauty. Sable fur, if you were rich enough, made for luxurious brow and lash extensions. Some court recipes for face powder included powdered snail shells. One queen was rumored to rinse her face in dew collected from lily petals filtered through spider silk. Then there was the problem of removal. At the end of the night, you'd peel off your mouse fur brows like a sticker from a cursed scrapbook. If the glue was too strong, you might lose a few of the tiny remaining real hairs underneath. If it wasn't strong enough, you'd find one floating in your soup. And soup, unfortunately, was a danger zone. Dinner conversations had to be carefully curated to avoid sudden expressions. Surprise could be disastrous. Laughter was the enemy. You smiled with your mouth, never your eyes. A well-timed compliment could cause a brow to lift and detach. And no one wanted to be the Duchess who flung her eyebrow into a diplomat's wine. You once witnessed a brow incident firsthand. The Countess of Lifford leaned too close to a candelabra, and one of her false arches curled dramatically like a burnt leaf. She didn't notice. Everyone else did. A gentleman tried to compliment her intelligence, but stared too long at her lopsided face. The room stifled giggles. She retired early. And still, despite the hazards, false brows remained in fashion. Because the alternative bare, unadorned foreheads was worse. A woman without eyebrows looked ill, or worse, devout. And in a royal court, looking too pious was just as dangerous as looking too pleased with yourself. So you wear your mouse brows. You pretend not to notice the itching. You endure the occasional slip or crooked placement. Because you are a royal woman, and if rodents are the price of regality, so be it. And somewhere in the shadows of the palace, a small army of tailors, furriers, and mouse trappers ensure that the eyebrow supply chain never falters. There are people whose whole jobs involve sourcing brow-grade rodent pelts. One man claims to specialize in matching fur tones to eye color. Another insists he can train mice to pre-grow symmetrical brows. You hope he's joking. You suspect he's not. When you finally retreat to your chamber and remove the tiny pelts, you place them gently in a carved ivory box lined with velvet. You've named them. You won't say what. Some things are sacred. Tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Comb the wig powder, the scalp glue, on 2 tiny strips of mystery mammal, and smile through the discomfort. Because you're elegant, you're mysterious, you're half mouse and wholly magnificent. You awaken in the middle of the night, disoriented by the cold, the creak of wood, and the unmistakable urge to relieve yourself. But you're a royal woman, encased in satin sheets and weighted down by velvet blankets and about 14 layers of underthings. What now you don't head to a bathroom? Because there isn't one. In the vast marble sprawl of your palace, the bathroom as we understand it today is still centuries away from becoming a standard fixture. There's no quiet toilet down the hall, no private flush, just you, a chamber pot, and a very different understanding of what it means to go. You shuffle across the room in the dark, careful not to trip on your own trailing nightgown or knock over the coals in the warming pan. Your maid is asleep on a straw mat by the door. You consider waking her, but know your royalty. You've trained for this. You can chamber pot alone. The pot itself is a lidded porcelain bowl, tucked under the bed, or hidden in an ornate cabinet called a commode. Some are quite fancy gold-trimmed, painted with floral scenes, even monogrammed. But at the end of the day, it's a bowl you squat over, in the dark, praying your aim is steady. You lift your gown, lower yourself with a sigh, and let nature do its work. It's not glamorous. It's not comfortable. But it beats wandering across the freezing stone halls to the nearest garderobe, a medieval closet-like structure built into the castle wall, often with a direct chute to the moat below. That's right. Waste went straight down and sometimes directly into the castle's water defenses. Historians still argue whether this was a bold sanitation shortcut or just a spectacular oversight. Either way, it made for pungent moats and questionable trout. If you do choose to visit the garderobe, prepare yourself. It's cold, drafty, and smells like centuries of regret. You'd sit on a wooden plank with a hole in it and stare down into the abyss, sometimes into daylight if it's positioned high enough. The wind whips up, and you understand immediately why royal women preferred chamber pots. In some more modern palaces, Versailles comes to mind, the lack of bathrooms led to horrifying habits. Guests and even nobles relieved themselves behind curtains in stairwells or in corners of the garden. Servants cleaned what they could. The rest was masked with perfume and denial. One foreign ambassador once described Versailles as glittering filth, a palace of golden mirrors and mysterious puddles. Charming. Back in your chamber, you finish your business and look for wiping cloths. Toilet paper isn't a thing yet. If you're lucky, there's a small stack of linen scraps reserved for this purpose. If not, dried moss or even a bit of straw might make an appearance. It depends on the region, the century, and your maid's attention to detail. You replace the pot's lid and slide it back under the bed a little closer to the edge. This time, you'll probably need it again before dawn. Later, a servant will empty it, hopefully, without complaint. But let's not romanticize this chamber pot. Duty was a thankless job. You might have a dozen pots in your household, all requiring daily disposal. Most were emptied into cesspits or tossed into nearby rivers. In cities, even royal households might discreetly dump pots out of upper windows, sometimes with a shout of warning, sometimes not. Gardez l'eau, they'd yell in France. Watch out for the water spoiler. It was not water. And here's where it gets worse. If you're entertaining guests, especially in a court setting, you must pretend none of this exists. You sip tea in embroidered salons and nod through poetry readings, all while your bladder fills and your stomach protests that third helping of boiled eel. What do? Excuse yourself for a powder break. A maid escorts you to a discreet corner, perhaps behind a screen, or into a side chamber known as a stool room. There, another pot awaits, sometimes cushioned, sometimes lined with straw. Occasionally, your ladies-in-waiting will stay in the room, with you continuing casual conversation while you go. There is no privacy. Royalty doesn't get to disappear. Your life is observed, commented upon, and often interrupted, yes, even during bathroom breaks. And menstruation. We covered the cloths, but we didn't cover what happens to them afterward. They're rinsed in cold water, wrung out by hand, then boiled with lye or vinegar before being hung to dry. Sometimes in the laundry courtyard, sometimes just outside your window. If you're high-ranking enough, someone else handles it. If not, we'll better hope your handmaid is discreet. You dream sometimes of indoor plumbing, of ivory toilet seats and warm water jets. But in your world, sewage systems are rudimentary, dangerous, and often worse than nothing. The palace stinks in places no perfume can fix. And yet, through all this, you maintain composure. You sit at court banquets and cross your legs at the ankle, sipping slowly and calculating how long you can wait. You politely refuse the third cup of wine. You ask to walk in the garden for air. And when all else fails, you excuse yourself and scurry off, skirts swishing toward the nearest porcelain pot and a few stolen moments of peace. You may be queen of the realm, but in the dead of night, hovering over a glorified bowl, you're just a woman trying not to tip it over. The palace is quiet now, its grand halls hushed under a blanket of dusk, and you're finally blessedly alone. Your feet ache, your corset creaks, and the weight of your wig has left an angry indent across your temples. It's time to unwind. But if you think that means slipping into a robe and removing your makeup with a soft cloth and a glass of wine, oh, sweet summer child, because you, a royal woman of the past, don't remove your makeup before bed. You sleep in it, proudly, religiously. Because that face you spent 3 hours perfecting this morning isn't just makeup, it's identity. To wash it off would mean showing your real skin, and that simply isn't done. So you climb into bed, still caked in ceruse vermilion and whatever questionable animal extract you applied at breakfast. Your eyebrows are still glued on. Your lips are sticky with waxed pigment. Your lashes, if you're lucky, still curve upward in unnatural defiance of time and gravity. And your face is both masterpiece and minefield. The reasons behind this nocturnal choice are varied and baffling. Some women believed that removing makeup too often would weaken the skin. Others feared the public or private discovery of blemishes, scars, or the normal texture of human flesh. But most simply couldn't risk the time or effort it would take to reapply every morning from scratch. So they let the face set like plaster in a mold. You shift on the pillow, carefully positioning your head so your powdered cheeks don't smudge too badly. The pillowcase, once embroidered white linen, is now stained beige pink with years of nightly face wear. It smells faintly of old rose oil, sour sweat, and the same melancholy that hangs over your chamber pot. Sleep comes but slowly. The paste on your skin tightens as it dries. Your face itches. You resist. Scratching your nails might chip the ceruse or worse, disturb your rodent brows. You lie still, breathing shallowly, hoping the waxy coating will hold until morning. Some women get inventive. They sleep propped upright, like vampires in a silk coffin to prevent makeup transfer. Others wrap their heads in scarves or stiff lace frames. One German duchess allegedly wore a soft wire cage over her face in bed to preserve the mask. It didn't help. She still woke up, looking like a crumbling fresco. Historians still argue whether these routines were acts of vanity, desperation, or simply obligation. You don't ponder it long. You're too focused on the strange way your skin now tingles. Not a nice tingle. The kind that whispers you might be allergic to powdered lead and regret. Let's not forget what this makeup actually does overnight. The lead sinks deeper into your pores. The mercury in your rouge seeps into your bloodstream. Over time, your skin becomes sallow, your hair thins, and your gums bleed. But to stop would be to look older, less desirable, less royal. And so, you press forward face first. Your maid enters at dawn with your wash basin. She offers to help freshen your face which really means dabbing away the most offensive crusts and reapplying powder in the blank spots. There's no deep cleansing, no warm water with gentle soap, just more layers, more powder, more hope. If something's cracking like the corners of your mouth or the creases beside your nose, she adds a little grease or egg white to seal it. It's basically medieval spackling. One empress reportedly used boiled cow's milk to plump the complexion. Another favored a paste of almond oil and crushed pearls. You just need to hide the rash forming under your chin. Your skin starts to betray you. Pustules rise like guilty secrets. You cover them with thicker powder. Your eyes water from the daily irritation, so your maid tints your lids with crushed flower petals to brighten the effect. But they sting. Everything stings. You consider letting your skin breathe for one day. Just one. But then your lady rival enters the salon, her face flawless and her wig newly powdered. She makes a casual remark about rough weather and glances at your jawline. You smile. She knows. You reapply. Night falls again. Your makeup remains. You lie in bed and wonder what it might feel like to splash your face with water. Real water, warm and clean, with a soft cloth and no fear. You imagine peeling off the layers, watching the colors swirl down a drain that doesn't exist yet. You imagine touching your face and recognizing it. But in your world, beauty is endurance. And endurance sleeps in makeup. You shift slightly, trying to avoid the side where last night's blush cracked into your pillowcase like a fading fresco. A small patch of your cheek feels damp. Is it sweat saliva? A slow leak of ceruse, hard to say. But you don't ask. You close your eyes. You count sheep, or rather powdered courtiers, and you drift off with a prayer that tomorrow's touch-up will be enough. Because you are a royal woman, and your face, as artificial as it is admired, must be worn like a mask, day and night, awake or dreaming, until perhaps it becomes permanent. Morning comes with a fanfare of aching joints and the soft clatter of trays. Your maid has arrived bearing breakfast, if you can call it that, and the day's first round of cosmetic maintenance. But even before the face powder and mouse brows come out, there's something far less elegant demanding attention: your hands. Now, your hands are supposed to be delicate, pale, smooth. The kind of hands that have never once scrubbed a pot, lifted a bucket, or unlatched a window. The only calluses you're allowed are from harp strings or embroidery needles. But no matter how idle your life might appear, your hands tell the truth. They touch, they sweat, they itch, and worst of all, they stink. That's right. Hand hygiene, royal as you may be, is more or less a disaster. Soap exists technically. You've seen it: lumpy, yellowish bricks that smell like mutton fat and lie. But it's used sparingly and rarely for routine washing. More often, your hands are wiped with rose water or lemon juice, sometimes a vinegar rinse. It's less about cleanliness and more about fragrance. After all, if your hands smell like cloves, no one will question what's under your nails. And trust me, you do not want to look under your nails. You're handed a tiny brush, more decorative than functional, and encouraged to buff your fingertips. Then comes the powder. Yes, face powder, now for hands. A dusting keeps them dry and looking elegant. Never mind the fact that your palms are sweating from nerves or heat, or simply trying not to faint during church. The powder absorbs it, until it doesn't. Let's not forget the nails. Long, clean nails are considered elegant, but there's no nail polish, no files, no proper clippers. If your nails get too long, They're trimmed with sewing scissors or bitten off in a panic before a banquet. If they break, hide them. A broken nail implies labor, and labor implies, well, peasantry. Some royal women painted their nails with crushed berries or a tint made from cochineal bugs. Others dipped their fingertips in honey water to soften the cuticles. One particularly ambitious noblewoman was rumored to shape her nails into tiny crescent moons and dye them with saffron just so she could claim they were kissed by the sun. They weren't. They were kissed by fungus. But let's talk about the worst part, the invisible grime. You don't realize it, but everything you touch is filthy. The wooden table, the satin pillow, the ivory comb, even the tiny silver spoon in your tea has been handled by half a dozen servants. There's no such thing as sterilization. There's barely such a thing as rinsing. Germ theory won't show up for another few centuries, so the best you can hope for is not sticky. Historians still debate whether noblewomen truly believed in the invisible dangers lurking on unwashed hands, or if they simply ignored it in favor of perfume and jewelry. Either way, your fingers are bacterial time bombs, and you're about to eat with them. Utensils exist, sure, but you don't always use them. Soups require spoons. Everything else hands. Gloves are worn at court, but they're removed for meals and replaced only if they haven't become too smudged with oil or juice. Some women even wipe their hands directly on their skirts, especially if the fabric is dark and forgiving. Royal table manners may be strict, but they are not always sanitary. After eating, you dab your fingertips with a perfumed cloth. That's it. No water, no soap, just a gentle pat-down, followed by a generous helping of rose oil balm to make your hands gleam like polished marble. You've sealed in the crumbs, the sweat, and the possibility of yesterday's pheasant. But at least you smell like spring. There's also the glove problem. Gloves are a noblewoman's armor lace silk or kid leather depending on the occasion. They keep your hands soft, your nails protected, and your identity half concealed. But they're rarely washed. Leather shrinks when wet and lace frays. So they're worn, reworn, powdered, and perfumed until the inside smells like a forgotten cheese plate. Taking off your gloves in public is an act of intimacy. Offering a bare hand is reserved for court rituals, engagement announcements, or the occasional flirtation with a poet too poor to court you properly. So your hands, hidden and cherished, are also quietly suffering. Cracks form in winter. Blisters form in summer. You treat them with honey and linen wraps. You smile and say nothing. Because to speak of rough hands is to invite speculation. Are you sick? Are you stressed? Are you, heaven forbid, doing things? One duchess famously wore mittens year-round and claimed it was for modesty. More likely, it was to hide a fungal infection that had taken root under her nails after a failed beautifying soak in goose fat. Another was rumored to have dipped her hands in milk daily, claiming it kept them as pale as moonlight. Her servants disagreed. And still, despite the discomfort, your hands must always appear delicate. You cradle fans with them. You wave them at processions. You let them linger over goblets and handwritten notes. You point, you gesture, you dismiss. All with the grace of someone pretending their fingers aren't burning from yesterday's citrus bath gone wrong. At night, your hands are wrapped in cloths, soaked with oil and herbs. Sometimes you wear thin leather gloves to bed tight enough to mold your fingers into a perfect shape. You dream of losing a ring and wake up convinced it's tangled in your hair. It isn't. It's on the floor, next to a mouse. You'll need that mouse tomorrow. You're running low on eyebrows. The sun is higher now, casting golden rectangles onto your chamber walls as you shuffle to your vanity table for a ritual even more awkward than powdering your face or securing your mouse brow pelts. It's time to refresh the body, a task that for royal women doesn't involve what you might naively call a bath. No bathing, as in immersing your whole body in water, has fallen out of favor. Depending on your era, it's either considered dangerously poor opening, morally suspect, or logistically exhausting. You don't draw a bath unless you're ill postpartum, or having one of those once-a-decade cleanliness crises. Most days, you rely on what your maid cheerfully calls the dry wash. She brings you a basin of lukewarm water, 2 stiff linen cloths, and a bottle of scented alcohol, usually rose water, or something with a medieval hint of decay. This is your bath. One cloth gets dipped. One stays dry. The goal: wipe the visible areas, face, neck, hands, armpits if you're feeling wild, anything below the waist, optional, or ignored entirely. You raise your arms and submit to the cold cloth. Your maid tries to be gentle, but the linen is scratchy, and the water, despite its scent, carries a note of something you don't want to identify. She dabs at your collarbone, then fans your arms dry with the second cloth. Your back, unwashed. Your feet encased in stockings since last week. Your legs. Let's not talk about your legs. And yes, you still smell. Everyone does. It's just that everyone smells elegantly. You in particular smell like a potpourri drawer that's been left inside a warm cabinet too long. Because that's the royal secret to hygiene, cover, not cleanse. Perfume isn't optional. It's essential. You don't wear one scent. You wear layers. Your underclothes are dusted with violet powder. Your hair is soaked in rosemary oil. Your wrists get dabbed with civet, a musky secretion scraped from the glands of a terrified wild cat. It smells awful on its own, but intoxicating when mixed with amber and patience. There's even perfume for your gloves, your pillows, your underthings. The aim is to transform your body from a living, sweating human being into a walking bouquet. And if that bouquet has a few moldy petals, powder it. Historians still debate whether royal women truly believed they were clean, or if they simply accepted filth as inevitable. After all, their ancestors bathed in public bathhouses and scrubbed with olive oil and ash. But by your era, those practices are long gone, replaced by scented cloths, dry powders, and a robust sense of denial. You do occasionally long for a proper bath, a real soak. Some queens had luxurious wooden tubs, often lined with sheets of waxed linen or copper to prevent leaks. But these tubs had to be hauled into rooms, filled bucket by bucket, with heated water and drained the same way. It took hours. Days if you include the post-bath laundry and the fainting spells caused by standing naked in a room that never reached above 50 degrees. When you do bathe, it's ceremonial. The room is screened off. Your ladies attend you, which sounds glamorous until you realize you're expected to make polite conversation while someone sponges your thighs with rose vinegar. Some enterprising noblewomen skip all that and opt for fumigation, a fancy term for squatting over a heated basin filled with herbs. Supposedly, the steam cleanses the lower regions. Realistically, it makes your thighs sweat and your maid sneeze. There are oils for everything: dry skin, oily skin, itching skin, mysterious rashes that might be mold or might be divine punishment. You've tried them all. Some burn, some sting. One smelled so strongly of garlic your cat avoided you for 2 days. Let's not forget hair removal. Shaving isn't fashionable blades or dull, risky, and prone to infection. Instead, you rely on pastes. Sticky, strange pastes made from sugar lime and arsenic. You apply them to your arms or face, wait for the tingle read, burning sensation, then peel it off, bringing unwanted hairs and sometimes patches of skin with it. Your armpits, if they're tended to at all, are plucked or scorched with candle wax. One Italian noblewoman recommended rubbing the area with dried nettle leaves to discourage growth. Another swore by a mix of vinegar and crushed eggshells. You try not to think about it. Your legs covered by gowns. No one cares. Your underarms decorated with lavender sachets tied into the sleeves of your shift. And your most intimate areas avoided entirely. A quick dab of rose water, maybe a whispered prayer. Doctors warn that too much cleansing disturbs the natural balance. You don't ask what that balance is. You just hope it's still intact. The irony is, despite all the perfumes and powders, you don't feel clean. Not really. You feel layered, preserved, like a floral mummy waiting to be unwrapped. But you smile. You smell like privilege. And when you glide through court trailing civet and cloves, no one questions your freshness. Because everyone else is just as fragrant, just as itchy, just as layered in secrets and rose-scented pretense. You're not clean. You're cloaked. And that, for now, is enough. By mid-afternoon, the palace is alive with movement, diplomatic visitors, rehearsed flirtations, and a never-ending buffet of layered gowns. You're due at a gathering in the solar room, a casual chat with the Duchess of Somewhere Important, and 3 ladies whose eyebrows appear to have swapped places overnight. Before you go, however, it's time to pick the gown, which sounds fun, until you realize what this actually involves. You stand there, arms slightly lifted, like a sacrificial mannequin, while your ladies-in-waiting descend on you with fabrics, corsets, pins, ribbons, and sighs of mild dread. Because dressing a royal woman isn't a task, it's a military operation. First comes the chemise, the only thing that ever truly touches your skin. It's linen, slightly yellowed, and permanently perfumed with last month's lavender rinse. Over that, stockings held up with garters. Then the corset whalebone or steel, depending on whether your dressmaker is feeling merciful. Your maid tightens the stays while murmuring something about posture. You nod, wheeze, and pretend your ribs aren't being gently folded inward like a piece of parchment. You can't bend now, and soon you won't be able to sit either. But oh, how your waist looks like the neck of a terrified swan. Next, the petticoats, plural. One for volume, one for insulation, one for luck, apparently. They're stiff, heavy, and always slightly crooked. You try not to step on them. You fail. Your maid yanks one layer while muttering a prayer to St. Crispin, patron of clothes that don't fall off in public. And now the gown. It takes 3 people to lower it over your head without unseating the wig or disturbing the mouse brows. You hold your breath, they lift, and suddenly you're encased in brocade. Embroidery glitters across your chest. Your arms disappear into sleeves that serve no purpose except to restrict movement and attract dust. But wait, what's that? The train is wrinkled. A disaster. One of the ladies irons it with a heated pan lid wrapped in wool. You're not allowed to move. You're not even allowed to think about moving. You simply stand there sweating into your underlayers while someone sings an old folk song about drowning in petticoats. Finally, the accessories. A ruff for your neck so stiff it squeaks when you tilt your head. A ribbon choker, jeweled pins, gloves, fan, a dainty purse that can't hold anything useful. And if the court's especially fashionable this season, heel shoes with soles so narrow you're basically walking on hooves. Now you're ready. Sort of. Because while your outer layers look divine, everything beneath is chaos. Your chemise is twisted. One stocking has slid halfway down. Your corset has shifted, pushing your left lung into your throat. And your fan, it's stuck in the belt loop of your petticoat. You can't fix any of this alone. You need a team, but you're also a royal. So you glide carefully with the grace of someone whose thighs are chafing and who hasn't taken a deep breath since dawn. Historians still debate whether royal women genuinely found beauty in this process or simply endured it because they had to. Some letters describe it as empowering. Others call it a ritual of restraint. You call it Tuesday. And just when you think you're free to leave, someone mentions underarm pads. Yes, today's heat requires extra precautions. Small sachets of absorbent wool, scented with crushed herbs, are tucked under your arms to prevent sweat from staining your gown. You smile. You nod. You wonder if your maid will ever forgive you for yesterday's lemongrass experiment. You make it to the solar room, each step calculated to avoid tripping on your own elegance. Other women turn to look. You match their gaze, knowing that while they're admiring your velvet cuffs, you're mentally calculating how soon you can return and take it all off. There's a curious quiet to this whole ritual. A surrender. You don't dress for comfort. You dress for symbolism. The colors say something. The fabric says something. Even your sleeves are speaking in the coded language of court hierarchy. Purple only for royalty. Green bold. Suggestive. Ivory safe and dangerously close to bridal. One lady wore orange once and was whispered about for weeks. The Duchess greets you. She's wearing blue damask with a neckline that would cause a priest to faint. You compliment her brooch. She compliments your ruff. Neither of you can move your necks. You sit slowly, carefully. The corset creaks. The train bunches. You fold your hands and sip tepid cider through lips painted 4 hours ago. This, after all, is what dressing up was for. Not mobility, not pleasure. Presentation. Eventually, the conversation turns to fashion trends. One lady sighs about a Spanish sleeve she ordered that arrived sewn shut. Another brags about smuggling Venetian lace past customs. You nod, laugh gently, and try to ignore the fact that your garter has given up entirely, and your stocking is now pooling somewhere near your knee. You last an hour, maybe 2. Then you excuse yourself with practiced elegance and shuffle back to your chamber. The gown is peeled off like the rind of an overripe fruit. You gasp with relief. The corset unlaced your spine re-expands like a forgotten scroll. And you lie there in your chemise, wondering if tomorrow you can get away with just 3 petticoats. Probably not. It's evening again. And after surviving corsets, false brows, and the thrilling danger of detachable sleeves, you're finally back in your chamber, your fingers aching slightly from a day of strategic fan waving and secret eye rolls. You'd think it's time to relax. But no. It's time for the ritual of the teeth. Let's get one thing straight. Dental hygiene in the royal world was less about health and more about survival. Your teeth were expected to look white, sort of stay, mostly intact, hopefully, and not kill you with infection before your 30th birthday. A low bar, yet one constantly tripped over. You sit in front of the mirror, open your mouth, and examine the battlefield. Your teeth are stained from wine, ink-dark sauces, and whatever spiced fruitcake you nibbled to avoid full meals. The edges are uneven, the molars ache, and there's something suspicious stuck between the back ones. Maybe duck, maybe lace. You're afraid to look too closely, so you call for your tooth powder. Yes, powder, not paste. A gritty, often bizarre blend of crushed seashells, ground hooves, and salt mixed with mint or charcoal for that luxurious crunch. Some formulas even include brick dust, which, while enthusiastic, does little except sandpaper the enamel into oblivion. Your maid brings a cloth-wrapped bundle. Inside, a tiny twig slightly frayed on one end. This is your toothbrush. You dip it in water, then into the powder, and begin the painstaking task of dragging it across your teeth, trying not to gag on the taste or inhale a nostril full of powdered bone. Your gums sting immediately. That's normal. Healthy pain, the physician called it. You try to ignore the metallic twinge and focus on your reflection. You smile. It's presentable. You're not bleeding. Much. But even this painful ritual is a privilege. Most peasants simply chew twigs or rub their teeth with a cloth. You at least have access to aromatic herbs, imported powders, and occasional clove oil for numbing. You've even heard rumors of royal women using honey to coat decaying teeth and delay pain. It works until the bees come. Historians still debate whether early tooth whitening techniques actually improved smiles or simply sped up dental disaster. Some women used vinegar rinses, which did brighten the enamel right before stripping it away. Others chewed licorice root or sage or rubbed ashes onto their gums for a healthy gray glow. You suspect those recipes were drafted by bitter poets. And what about bad breath a royal woman must not reek, especially from the mouth? So you chew, constantly. Cloves, fennel, cardamom, sometimes tiny pebbles coated in sugar and mint oil. They taste terrible. They work briefly, until the sugar rots the tooth it was meant to save. If things get dire, your physician arrives with the dreaded pincers. No anesthetic, no sterilization, just a strong grip and a prayer. A rotten molar is considered an impure humoral imbalance, so removing it is a medical cleansing. Never mind the screaming, or the fainting, or the secondary infection. One queen reportedly had all her molars removed at age 25 and replaced with wooden pegs. They clacked when she laughed. She rarely did. You shudder at the thought. You've managed to keep most of your teeth intact, though one of your canines has darkened noticeably. And your front incisor has a hairline crack from an unfortunate run-in with a goblet 2 winters ago. No one noticed. You hope. Your grandmother used to rinse her mouth with wine every morning, claimed it kept the toothworms away. Yes, toothworms. Tiny invisible creatures people once believed lived inside your molars, gnawing from within. You don't believe it. But sometimes at night when your jaw throbs, you wonder. Some court ladies claim to possess ancient Etruscan dental secrets. One dips her brush in crushed pearls. Another swears by boiled tree bark. You've tried both. You now have a pearl allergy and a lifelong distrust of trees. As for flossing, not a thing. If something is lodged in your teeth, you remove it with a needle, a quill tip, or if desperate, a fishbone. Once during a royal banquet, you excuse yourself not to cry, but to pry a goose tendon from between your molars using the end of a hairpin. You succeed in cleaning what you can tonight. You rinse with rose water and hope the mint leaves in your mouth are fresh enough to fool the bishop tomorrow. Your teeth ache, your gums pulse, but your breath surprisingly pleasant. You smile at your reflection again this time with less judgment. Yes, your teeth are uneven, slightly yellowed. and possibly treacherous. But you've lived, you've laughed, you've chewed questionable stews without dying, and in a world without fluoride or dentists that counts as a miracle. You tuck away your tooth powder, wipe your twig clean, and say a silent prayer to Saint Apollonia, patron of dental pain, because tomorrow you'll smile again. And if your tooth falls out mid-curtsy, well, you'll just pretend it was a pearl. Twilight settles over the palace with its usual hush of creaking floorboards, muffled servants, and the whisper of silk slippers retreating down corridors. You're not quite ready for bed, because tonight there's another quieter danger to face. One that doesn't wear a crown or offer courtly compliments. It skitters. It bites. It lays eggs. That's right, Lice. You sit on a cushioned stool posture, perfect arms limp at your sides like a tragic oil painting as your maid approaches with a fine-tooth comb, a jar of pomade, and a look that says, "We're going in again." Lice were, and are, tenacious little freeloaders. In royal times, they were practically honorary courtiers. Everyone had them. You, your ladies-in-waiting, the duchess you shared a dance with, even the bishop, whose robe smelled faintly of vinegar and pride, and while peasants could shave their heads or bathe in cold streams, you had image to maintain. Hair was your halo, your virtue, your billboard of class. So, no, you didn't shave. You powdered. Every morning, your wig was dusted with layers of white powder to mask smell, absorb oil, and ideally smother parasites. Every evening, you combed, or rather your maid combed with slow, deliberate strokes and frequent pauses to inspect the teeth of the comb under candlelight. The lice were never truly gone. They lived at your scalp, in your wig, and most offensively, in the seams of your bedding. That's right. Your lace-trimmed, goose-feather-stuffed, royal blue, velvet-draped mattress was a multi-level parasite condominium. You itch just thinking about it. Some women burn their wigs at the end of each season, starting fresh, with hair from new donors, usually peasants, occasionally the deceased. Others relied on treatments, pomades made from pig fat oil of rosemary vinegar or a mysterious paste containing mercury. Historians still argue whether these treatments killed lice or just poisoned the wearer into not noticing. Your treatment of choice tonight is an oil of bay leaves and clove. It smells nice, but it makes your scalp tingle, and not in a romantic way. Your maid dabs it behind your ears, down your part, and around the nape of your neck, where lice like to throw their little parasite parties. You ask her if she sees any. She lies. You thank her. But lice aren't your only problem. There are also fleas, bedbugs, mites. You share your world with more invisible roommates than you care to count. You once woke with 6 bites across your collarbone and were told it was a sign of divine jealousy. You were not comforted. Your bedding is shaken weekly, though only the top layer, since laundering sheets, is such a production that it happens once every few months, if that. Your pillows smell faintly of crushed herbs and strongly of resignation. There's a rumor at court that Queen So-and-so was so infested one year that a servant found an entire louse nest in the lining of her coronation hood. You laugh. Quietly. You also check your own hood the next morning. Some women take to carrying lice sticks, long, thin rods used to scratch discreetly under wigs or elaborate updos. You have one tucked into your bodice, carved from ivory and tipped with silver. It's your favorite accessory. You pretend it's for show. It's not. One duchess claimed to have invented a headband that emitted a fragrance so repulsive to bugs that even men avoid her. It worked. She died single. But her hair was parasite-free. You once tried a sleeping bonnet soaked in mint vinegar. It dripped. It burned. You wept. Your maid pretended not to notice. And yet the next week you ask for another. Because here's the truth. Cleanliness isn't an option. It's an illusion. You're not fighting lice, you're politely negotiating with them. The wig gets powdered. The scalp gets oiled. The comb gets cleaned. The itching fades for a few hours. And then it starts again. A nibble behind the ear, a scratch at the nape, a twitch of discomfort you disguise with a graceful tilt of your head. You sleep lightly, hair wrapped in linen hands tucked above the sheets to avoid scratching in your dreams. Sometimes you wake with a bite and blame a spider. Sometimes you find one. Usually you don't. Historians point to lice combs as standard items in royal vanity sets tucked alongside perfume bottles, rouge pots, and tweezers. They weren't shameful. They were necessary, part of the costume. You think for a moment about shaving your head, just starting over. A few noblewomen have done it, usually under a veil of mourning or piety. You could claim a vow of modesty. You could say it's a spiritual choice. But then you remember the wigs, the expectations, the ballroom, and you sigh. Because you are a royal woman, a walking performance. And your hair, even when it houses a minor infestation, is part of the show. You lift your chin. You powder again. And tomorrow you'll itch like a queen. You wake with a start, your scalp itchy, your mouth dry, and your stomach already doing polite battle with last night's undercooked pigeon pie. Morning light drips in through the shutters, catching the floating flecks of powder feather and mystery debris in the air. Another royal day awaits. But first, the undergarments. Let's be honest, they're not glamorous. They're not lacy. They are in fact a strange cocktail of linen discomfort and faint despair. The first item is the shift, a long, loose linen nightgown, worn under everything including your corset. It's meant to protect your clothes from your body. Think about that. The shift exists because you're expected to be dirty, and heaven forbid your expensive outerwear touches skin. You slip it on with help. It's yellowed even after boiling and has patches that used to be embroidered until time and soap wore them away. You try not to think about the small hole near the armpit. It's fine. It's always fine. Next, the stays, aka the corset. Yes, again. Tightly laced, heavily boned, and decorated in a way no one will ever see. This one is lined with a stiffened pasteboard and smells faintly of lavender and panic. Your maid tightens it, gradually pausing only when you let out a dramatic grunt that sounds halfway between pain and prayer. You smile afterward, though you can no longer breathe properly. On top of this, you begin layering petticoats, again this time for morning wear. Slightly lighter than the formal ones, but still plenty to make movement a strategic operation. They swish and cling. The linen clings back. Your thighs are already protesting. Then comes a modesty panel, a cloth triangle pinned at the neckline of your shift to prevent any accidental peeks at collarbones. Those are for husbands, sculptors, and the occasional oil portrait not for daily viewing. Your stockings today are a new pair, mercifully clean and patched only once. They're held up by garters tied just above the knee. You tie them yourself. One comes loose within the hour. You're ready for the final, least discussed undergarment, the drawers, or rather, the lack thereof. Because here's the charming historical twist: many royal women didn't wear underpants. Not because they were rebels, but because drawers were considered masculine, impractical, and somehow suspiciously modern. You wore layers of fabric, and trusted the petticoats to keep everything where it should be. Some women wore split drawers, wide-legged trousers open at the crotch for convenience during chamber pot visits, but even these were controversial. Historians still debate whether royal women routinely went without underwear, or if they had specialized garments lost to time. What we know for sure, you're walking around in 12 pounds of fabric and no actual briefs. You sit delicately, legs angled, just so trusting in layers of etiquette and linen to protect your modesty. You sip herbal water, hoping to delay your first chamber pot visit. The less said about that routine, the better. Let's talk sweat. Your underlayers absorb most of it, especially during summer. You perspire through your chemise corset and petticoats until your back is damp and your inner elbows feel like damp parchment. The linen collects, it grows heavy, and begins to chafe. But the worst part, you can't change until nightfall. You rewear the same chemise for days, unless you're on your period, which, by the way, adds another charming garment, the menstrual cloth belt. You tie it around your waist, then secure linen rags underneath, holding them in place with more pins than safety. You walk carefully. You sit carefully. You don't sneeze without bracing. When the cloths are soiled, they're rinsed in vinegar water and boiled. Your maid does this. You pretend not to notice. You layer over all of this with an outer gown, appropriate for light court engagements. It's wool, in winter silk, in summer. Both are terrible choices. You sweat in the silk. You itch in the wool. You envy no one. Some noble women wore smocks with built-in pockets, rare but convenient. You don't. You rely on a tiny bag tied at the waist, hidden between your layers. Inside, a handkerchief, a scrap of scented cloth, and a prayer written by your confessor. The bag chafes your thigh all day. But what's the point of all these layers if they don't protect you from the filth of daily life? That's the question you ask each time your hem drags through an unidentifiable puddle. The palace floors are swept, yes, but rarely scrubbed. There are dogs. There are servants. There are accidents. You don't lift your gown unless you're walking upstairs or dancing. You trust the weight of the fabric to brush grime away from your feet. You lie to yourself. Under all this, your body protests. Rashes, yeast, heat boils. They're called court roses in polite society. You dab ointment behind curtains and say you're praying. Everyone knows you're not. Some women develop abscesses where corsets press too tightly. Others suffer from infections that spread under layers of unwashed linen. You develop a small sore on your shoulder blade from a stiffened seam. It bleeds. You ignore it, and yet, through it all, you appear radiant. That's the trick of royal underdress misery beneath majesty. You smile. You walk with poise. You carry 12 layers of sweat-soaked fabric like it's spun gold, because that's what's expected. You don't just wear clothing, you wear image. And that image, however itchy and unventilated, must hold. It's past midday now, and you've made it through 3 stiff curtsies, 1 herbal tonic that tasted like mossy vinegar, and exactly 4 unspoken insults from the Lady of Twickenham, 2 of them regarding your evolving complexion. You're starving. Naturally. But don't get too excited, because royal food is a journey, and not the kind with satisfying conclusions. You're escorted to the dining chamber, where the midday meal dinner in your world is being served. The long table groans under the weight of heavy platters, silver goblets and centerpieces made entirely of meat arranged to look like other meat. Somewhere a pheasant wears a pastry crown. It's all terribly elaborate and mostly inedible. You take your seat posture, perfect gloves off. A servant pours wine into your goblet, warm spiced and slightly sour. Water is suspicious. Too clean, too plain. Wine, on the other hand, is aged just enough to kill the worst of the microbes and soften the taste of questionable meats. Your first course arrives boiled eel in almond milk sauce. You do not ask questions. You take a small, polite bite. It tastes like regret wrapped in slime. You smile and nod. Royal food looks luxurious, but it's rarely fresh. Preservation methods are rudimentary at best. Meat is salted, smoked, or soaked in vinegar. Spices are added not just for taste, but to distract from the tang of almost going bad. You once bit into a sausage that crackled suspiciously. You haven't asked for sausage since. Bread is a staple, but not soft rolls or warm baguettes. You're given hard trenchers, thick slabs of bread that act as both plate and napkin. They soak up grease-absorbed sauces and are later tossed to the poor, or the dogs. You don't know which. Possibly both. Vegetables are cooked to mush, often with sugar and cinnamon. Fruits are baked until their texture resembles sadness. Raw produce. That's peasant food, and suspiciously linked to indigestion. You nibble what's served and say a quick prayer for your digestive tract. Dessert arrives early in the form of sugar sculptures. Yes, actual edible statues. One shaped like a swan, one like a lute, and one confusingly like a ship on fire. You break off a piece of the sail. It tastes like candle wax and ambition. Historians still argue whether noble diets caused more harm than good. Many believe the high meat consumption and constant wine drinking led to everything from gout to rotten teeth. They're not wrong. You've seen the swollen toes of one lady who insists she was born dainty. She's not. She's pickled. You turn your attention to cutlery. Forks exist, but they're suspicious, even heretical in some places. Many guests still eat with fingers daintily, of course, with frequent wipes on perfumed cloths. Knives are personal, brought from home. You unfold your own from a velvet pouch. It's dull from ceremonial use, and never quite sharp enough for the roasted peacock in front of you. Yes. Peacock. It's been roasted whole feathers, reapplied afterward, beak propped open in a permanent scream. You take a bite. It's dry. The feathers are not edible. Someone has tried anyway. The meal continues with glacial pacing. Each course is paraded in with flair, each dish announced in florid language you barely register. Pork cured in the Venetian style, lamprey jelly with rosewater, a pudding of crushed bone marrow and honey. You eat tiny portions. You must. Gluttony is frowned upon. Also, you'd like to avoid collapsing in your gown's fourth petticoat. One lady once fainted into her stew. Her wig absorbed most of it. She never quite recovered socially. As you eat, you chat. Carefully. Politics, poetry, and the occasional flirtation, but nothing too funny. Laughter while chewing is dangerous. One misplaced guffaw, and you'll snort venison. It's happened before. Some ladies bring their own spice boxes to the table, tiny containers of saffron nutmeg or powdered ginger. A subtle flex of wealth and palate. You borrow clove powder from your neighbor and discreetly sprinkle it over your turnips. It doesn't help. You once asked for a lemon wedge and caused a minor scandal. Too foreign, too acidic, too useful. The servants, meanwhile, stand silently pretending not to notice when a guest spits a questionable bite into their napkin or slips a bone into the folds of their gown. One maid retrieves a grape from the floor with such efficiency you wonder if she practices at night. Finally, the meal concludes with wafers and sweet wine. Your teeth ache already. The wafers are flavored with rose and almond, sometimes violet. They stick to your gums like regret. You sip the wine and try to ignore the slight buzzing in your ears. You haven't had water all day. Back in your chamber, you burp delicately behind a fan. You feel full, but not nourished, satisfied, but slightly ill. You lie back and imagine what it might be like to eat something simple: warm bread, fresh figs, a glass of cool water, without fear. But such luxuries aren't for royalty. You dine on spectacle, not sustenance. Because for a royal woman, even meals are performance art, and your stomach, merely the stage. After the theatrical ordeal of dinner, you're expected to stroll through the palace gardens or attend a salon for poetry, philosophy, or awkward lute recitals. But before any of that, there's something pressing your faces peeling. Not melting exactly, but the layers of lead-based powder vermilion rouge and sweat-activated perfume have begun to shift. A tiny flake has landed on your lace collar. You try to brush it away discreetly, only to smear it. Now you look like a marionette with water damage. Time to fix it. Your maid retrieves your beauty kit. It's not a makeup bag, it's an arsenal. Compacts carved from ivory, tiny pots of colored wax, a stick of deer fat used to set the brows. You glance in the mirror. Your cheeks are still pinkish, your lips only slightly faded, but your forehead, a tragedy. She dabs on more ceruse, patting it into place, with a puff made from rabbit fur. You inhale. It smells like dust and distant illness, but it covers the cracks. That's what matters. Royal women don't have the luxury of privacy. Your face must be flawless, even if it's flaking off by evening. So you refresh, repaint, realign your brows if they've begun to droop. One of them always droops. If the lighting is soft, you can get away with a little blotting. If it's candlelit, even better flames are the great equalizer. They blur everything into romance, or at least tolerable haziness. But tonight is not soft or candlelit. It's moonlight and torches. You're attending a moon garden stroll, a tradition popular at court, wandering around hedges in elaborate shoes, pretending to be moved by poetry while your ankle threatens to betray you. You apply a fresh dab of rose balm to your lips and a bit of crushed pearl dust to your collarbone. It's all about illusion. Your body is tired, itchy, mildly bloated from pickled walnuts and partially encased in whalebone. But no one can know. You make your entrance, gliding like a silk-covered swan. You link arms with a countess whose hair is so tall it scrapes ivy from the archways. She whispers a compliment about your glow. You thank her. She doesn't know it's sweat. And then it begins, the passive-aggressive compliments. You're looking unusually vibrant tonight. That shade suits your particular undertones. Did your maid manage to get the stain out of your ruff? I heard the oil was persistent. It's a game, a delicate one, played with smiles and feathered fans. You fan yourself lightly. It doesn't help. Under the corset, your powder is beginning to puddle. You move carefully, lifting your skirts just enough to let a breeze find its way up through petticoats and powdered thighs. A soft gasp escapes you. Heavenly. The poetry begins. A young lord with more enthusiasm than rhythm recites something about moonlight on marble. You nod. You pretend to listen. Really, you're watching a moth commit social suicide by dive-bombing a duke's wig. And then it happens. Someone faints. It's not you this time, but it's close. One of the ladies in red. She crumples gently onto the grass, her panniers collapsing like sad meringue. Her maid rushes over. A vial of vinegar is produced. Everyone makes the appropriate cooing noises while secretly calculating if the spot she landed on was damp. You adjust your position. You've felt that faintness before. It's not always hunger. Sometimes it's heat. Sometimes it's simply the weight of the mask, emotional and literal. Your face, after all, isn't designed to survive weather. It's a painted shield over a battlefield of pores. Historians argue whether royal cosmetics were an art form or a defense mechanism. The truth is it's both. You wear your face like armor. You sharpen your lashes, rouge your cheeks like war paint. It's not about attraction, it's about control. But by hour 2, even the most fortified faces begin to fail. Lips fade, powder cakes, rouge drips. One lady's brow slides subtly southward until it's flirting with her eyelid. You sneak away under the guise of checking on the fainted girl. Really? You're headed to the refreshment tent. You need wine shade and something vaguely edible. You settle for wine and a fig. Back in the tent's dim corner, you check your reflection in the polished brass tray. Not ideal. Your chin is shiny. Your forehead is cracking like an old fresco. You pinch your cheeks. It helps. Sort of. Your maid arrives, whispers something about an emergency fan repair. You nod. She knows what you really mean. She dabs your neck, reapplies powder, wipes your upper lip. The walk home is slow. You've survived the night, mostly intact. You remove your outer gown, immediately collapsing onto a chaise while your maid works at the pins in your hair. A mouse brow falls off. You don't care. You're done performing. For now, it's well past midnight now, and the palace has gone quiet, at least on the surface. The guards shift on their feet outside your chamber door. The fire in the hearth burns low, and your maid is gently tugging the last of your hairpins out with the weary sigh of someone who knows they'll do all this again tomorrow. And you're preparing for bed. Now let's not pretend this involves soft pajamas, face masks, and a feather duvet. A royal bedtime isn't cozy, it's ceremonial. A process, an ordeal, wrapped in embroidered linen and unspoken expectations. Because yes, even sleep must be done with decorum. First, you change into your night clothes, or rather, your night shift. It's a plain linen gown, stiff at the collar, and gathered at the wrists, long enough to trip on if you're not careful. It's not cute. It's not flattering. It's functional. Barely. You're already wearing it beneath your outer garments. So undressing for bed mostly means removing the pounds of fabric stacked on top the corset, sweet relief petticoats sweaty and sour, and finally the stockings which cling to your calves like desperate ivy. You peel them off, slowly, checking for rashes, bruises, or the mysterious bite you suspect came from something with too many legs. Your maid inspects your feet as always. Blisters are common. Ingrown toenails are worse. She rubs your heels with oil of rosemary and mutters about the Duchess who once had a toe amputated because of a poorly fitted dancing shoe. You pretend not to listen. Now for your hair. If you've been wearing a wig all day, it's removed and stored in a velvet-lined box that smells faintly of old perfume and lies. Underneath your own hair is probably braided or twisted tightly to keep it out of the way. It itches. It always itches. Your maid unravels the braids and combs through the strands. Gently, she knows you'll flinch if she finds lice. She applies a bit of oil to your scalp and pins your hair into a loose wrap, then covers it with a linen cap. You resemble an exhausted cupcake. But before you lie down, there's still the matter of your bedding. Your bed is large, curtained, and more complicated than a stage set. The sheets are linen, the mattress stuffed with feathers or straw, depending on the season, and the pillows are stacked to an absurd height. You do not jump into bed. You enter it one leg at a time, guided by your maid, who tucks the coverlet just enough to suggest comfort while still allowing you to maintain posture. You are not alone. Because in your bed lurk all the companions of a royal woman's night lice dust, mites the occasional flea, and the embroidered guilt of 100 missed prayers. You light a candle, whisper half a psalm, and lie back. The mattress groans. So does your spine. If you're particularly lucky, a warming pan filled with hot coals and wrapped in fabric has been passed between the sheets to knock out the cold. If not, you huddle against your own body heat and hope for mercy. The chamber is never truly warm. Even in summer, the stone walls radiate a certain chill. You pull the covers up to your chin and exhale slowly, adjusting your position so the corset bruises don't press too hard against the mattress. Some women sleep sitting up, half reclined, because it preserves the face. Others lie flat and risk the pillow stains. You try a hybrid angle propped slightly with your arm under your cheek, a position approved by etiquette but hated by your vertebrae. You stare into the canopy above. It's embroidered with scenes of saints' flowers or the family crest. You don't remember. You've never actually looked during the day. But at night, in the dark, it becomes your ceiling of worries. You think about everything you must do tomorrow. Dress pose, smile, eat politely, pretend you're not itchy. You wonder if your cheeks will swell again, if your toothache will return, if the rash under your arm is something your physician will name this time. You whisper to your maid that you're ready. She snuffs out the candle. Darkness folds over the room like another curtain. Outside the bed, the fire dies. Mice scurry in the walls. The chamber pot waits by the window, already half full. You tell yourself you'll hold it till morning. You won't. Historians still debate how much sleep royal women actually got. Between the layers, the expectations and the ambient noise of an uninsulated palace true rest was rare. You drift, but lightly. You dream, but in snatches. In your dreams, you're not in this gown, not in this skin. You're barefoot in a field hair, unbraided, eating an apple that hasn't been poached in wine or wrapped in sugar paste. You smile in your sleep. Your maid hears it. She smiles too. Because even queens, duchesses, and powdered paragons of etiquette need one moment, just one, where they can be entirely themselves. Even if it's only between the last blink and the first bell. The rooster calls far too early, but you're already half awake, tangled in sheets that cling with the enthusiasm of wet parchment. Your joints creak as you shift. It's a new day, but your body feels like it's been through a skirmish, bruised, bent, and mildly perfumed. But before the ceremonial good morning and the return of the corset brigade, there's one duty left that no one ever talks about in portraits or romance tales. Your monthly reckoning, that's right, the crimson guest, the royal inconvenience, your period. You don't have modern pads or tampons. You don't have ibuprofen or hot water bottles. What you do have is cloth-thick, scratchy, carefully folded linen rags and a belt made of canvas string and eternal hope. It loops around your waist with the cloth pinned between your legs. It's clunky. It shifts. It leaks. You know it will. You pray it won't be during an audience with the ambassador. Your maid changes the linens discreetly, boiling them afterward in a pot reserved for exactly this purpose. You never ask where the pot is kept. You suspect you wouldn't want to know. Cramps. Oh, yes, but you're not allowed to have cramps. You're expected to rise to dress, to parade with grace and elegance, to bleed without breaking stride. Some noble women swore by herbal remedies. Mugwort, fennel, crushed beetle paste, don't ask. You've tried them all. Most made you burp. One gave you visions. None relieved the pain. So you do what royal women have done for centuries, you pretend. You powder your face a little heavier to hide the pallor. You stiffen your posture to mask the abdominal spasms. You even smile at the steward delivering breakfast, though every sip of tea feels like a betrayal of your uterus. And through all this, you still worry about the practicalities. Will your gown stain? Will someone smell something? Is the pad shifting again? Historians still debate how effective these early menstrual belts really were. Some evidence suggests layers upon layers of linen created enough padding to manage a light flow. Others insist women bled freely and simply changed clothes more often. You hope it's the former. You pray it's not both. One French princess reportedly had an entire shift designed just for menstruation red silk lining to hide stains and extra padding stitched into the seat. It weighed 10 pounds. She wore it anyway. You can relate. And don't think you get a break from court during this time. You're still expected to appear at functions, dinners, processions. You're still laced tightly into your corset, compressing not just your waist, but the very source of your discomfort. Walking becomes an act of courage. Sitting gamble. Laughing, dangerous. You avoid white gowns like the plague. You wear darker colors, plum burgundy, anything that won't betray you with a single shift of fabric. You carry extra linen tucked into your sleeve, just in case. Always just in case. Then there's the emotional side. You're tired, you're irritable, you're bloated, but you're not allowed to be any of those things. You're a lady. You're grace embodied. Even when your abdomen feels like it's being wrung out by a vengeful saint. You excuse yourself from a dance claiming a touch of the vapors. Everyone nods sympathetically. They know what you really mean. The women, at least. Back in your chamber, you lie down briefly, just 5 minutes of solitude. Your maid brings a cloth dampened with lavender water for your forehead and whispers that the Duchess is also unwell today. You feel a flash of solidarity. Royal blood may be inherited, but menstrual blood is the great equalizer. Even queens bleed. Even queens cramp. You rest, just long enough to breathe. Then you rise. Again, because the gown must be worn. The fan must be twirled. The illusion must be preserved. And tomorrow, when it's finally over, you'll still wake up sore, still put on the shift, and still smile like nothing happened. But tonight, you can let your stomach spasm, let your brow sweat, and whisper curses into your pillow in 3 different languages. Because you are a royal woman, and even your misery must be majestic. It's late morning, and while the court buzzes with its usual nonsense gossip about who fainted during prayers, speculation on the bishop's suspiciously youthful assistant, you are enduring a humiliation as old as royalty itself. You are being cleaned, not by soap, not by a relaxing bath, but by someone else's hands. Your maid, your chamber woman, your long-suffering confidant who has seen you in more compromising positions than your husband ever will. Because here's the unspoken truth of royal hygiene: you don't clean yourself. You are cleaned, dusted, dabbed, deodorized. You lift a limb and someone else manages the rest. Today it's a dry cleaning. Your linen shift is pulled halfway down. You stand there, arms out, as your maid wipes your torso with rosewater-soaked cloths. Not exactly refreshing, definitely not dignified. The cloths are cold, the scent overpowering, and your skin is already irritated from yesterday's wool corset rubbing against the same spot for 10 straight hours. She lifts your hair to get behind your ears. You wince. She murmurs apologies. She works quickly, efficiently, because that's what she was trained to do. Some noble women had full cleaning teams, one for the body, one for hair, one for garments. You don't. You have 2 women who do everything. Wash your linens, dress your wounds, empty your chamber pot. Their hands are chapped. Their expressions are neutral. Their stories are silent. You ask for a mirror. Your maid obliges. You check your armpits, not because you care what they look like, but because you're genuinely unsure if they're still functional. The herbal pads are still damp, clinging like wilted petals. She replaces them. New pads, new scent sage and lemon balm this time. You ask if you smell. She lies. Historians still argue whether noble women were aware of how little actual cleanliness they experienced. Some letters suggest they did notice writing about clammy rashes and odors that linger. Others seem entirely unfazed, as if they believed perfume and divine favor would carry them through. You're aware. You've noticed how your gown, once worn, becomes increasingly offensive by the hour. How your underarms feel like tiny portable ovens. How your thighs stick together in a way that's more betrayal than biology. And yet you do nothing yourself. It's not because you're lazy. It's because the social structure doesn't allow it. To wash your own feet would suggest equality with the help. To scrub your own back, an act of desperation. You don't get to be human. You get to be maintained. Your chambermaid now dusts your neck with violet powder and carefully places a ribbon just above your collarbone. It hides the chafing line left by yesterday's necklace. She adjusts your chemise so the embroidered hem peeks out of your bodice just enough to say, "I care about detail, but not too much." Then it's time for the feet. You sit on a low stool. She removes your stockings. You already know what she'll find: slight swelling redness, where the garter pressed too hard a blister from yesterday's procession. She says nothing, just applies balm made from lard lavender and supposedly ground pearls. It doesn't help. Some women go their entire lives without ever touching their own feet. You have once or twice in the dark when your maid was sick and your toes felt like tiny coals. It felt almost scandalous. But today is not one of those days. Today you submit. Your feet are powdered, rewrapped. You wonder briefly if they'll ever know fresh air again. Then your maid pulls out a little wooden stick. You flinch. Not for punishment. This is the tongue scraper. That's right. Even your mouth must be maintained by another. She gently asks you to open wide, then scrapes your tongue with the precision of someone who's done this 100 times. You gag slightly. She doesn't react. You rinse with diluted vinegar. It burns. Your breath now smells like salad. But at least it doesn't reek of last night's duck stew. And then you're done. You rise now, officially freshened, though you still feel vaguely like a sponge that's been wrung out but not rinsed. You look in the mirror. You appear pristine. But you know the truth. Beneath the powder, the perfume, the silk, and the pageantry, you are a woman held together by corsets, cosmetics, and other people's labor. A beautifully maintained illusion. And the irony, the more help you need to appear clean, the more unclean you secretly feel. Another afternoon passes under the heavy velvet of court routine, and you begin to wonder, not for the first time, whether cleanliness has less to do with hygiene and more to do with holiness. Because as strange as it sounds, there was once a time when being dirty wasn't just normal, it was virtuous. That's right. Dirt could be divine. Take the saints, for example. Some of the most pious women in history bragged about not washing. One even claimed that to bathe would be to offend God's handiwork, as if a scrubbed elbow might be mistaken for vanity. Another slept on straw, soaked in her own sweat, as a way to reject earthly pleasures. Inspirational, possibly. Smelly, definitely. You're not a saint, of course. You're a royal. But the sentiment trickles down. Cleanliness is suspicious. Cleanliness suggests leisure. And leisure, that's a slippery slope to decadence. So what do? You embrace the grime. Not openly, of course. Publicly, you're powdered and perfumed. But privately, you go weeks without bathing. You reuse shifts until the collar stiffens. You dab, never scrub. You avoid full immersion as if water were cursed. Because in your world, full baths are dangerous. They open the pores, invite disease, disrupt the humors. A good, respectable woman avoids such temptations. She is modest. She is dry. Historians still debate how often medieval and early modern noblewomen actually bathed. There's evidence of bathhouses, personal tubs, even ornate bathing rituals. But the records are spotty. The truth probably lies somewhere between daily dips and decade-long droughts. You have a bathtub. It's copper. It's shallow. And it's currently holding a stack of folded linens and a vase of dried lavender. Because tubs aren't really for bathing, they're for display. When you do bathe, which happens perhaps twice a month, it's a full operation. The tub is hauled to your chamber. Buckets of hot water are poured in. Scented herbs are added, chamomile, thyme, rose petals if you're lucky. You step in, trying not to scream. The water's never the right temperature. The floor is drafty. Your maid scrubs you with a cloth and keeps her eyes respectfully averted. You're in and out in 10 minutes. Any longer, and you risk catching a chill which could spiral into a fever, which could spiral into a funeral. No pressure. But most days, you rely on dry cleaning. Not the kind involving clothes. The kind involving powders. Crushed starch chalk, even ground rice, all applied to your skin, with puffs and mitts. They absorb sweat. They blur blemishes. They hide reality. Under your arms, lavender sachets. Behind your knees, rosemary paste. Between your toes, nothing. You don't bend that far. And when you smell, because yes, you do, you blame it on the weather, the servants, or spiritual warfare. Anything but your own body. Even your underclothes carry the weight of expectation. Stains natural, odors inevitable. But you don't speak of them. You hand them off to be laundered with a glance and a prayer. Your maid once told you a story, a noblewoman who refused to bathe for 3 years, believing it would protect her from the plague. It didn't. But she died smelling like rose vinegar and denial. And then there's your monthly washing ritual, the one done not for hygiene, but for purity. On the last Sunday of each month, you're ceremonially dabbed with holy water and rubbed with a cloth blessed by the local priest. It's not about getting clean. It's about being seen trying to be clean, because in the court's eyes, effort is everything. You could smell faintly of boiled onions, but as long as your wrists are dusted with jasmine powder and your ruff is freshly starched, you're elegant. You could have mildew in your wig, but if your cheeks are pink and your teeth show no obvious abscesses, you're radiant. Image conquers essence. Presentation eclipses perspiration. And so you continue. Powder. Perfume. Pretend. You lean into the illusion. Because to reject it would mean not just breaking the rules, but unraveling the entire stage play of royalty. You once asked your confessor if modesty meant avoiding cleanliness. He paused, smiled, and said, "Modesty is in the eyes of the washer." You're still not sure what that means, but it sounded holy enough to believe. So you carry your sacred dirt, your pious powder, your elegant grime. Because in your world, being dirty is not a failure. It's tradition. The palace is quieter now, as if even the walls have grown tired of pretense. You lie on your side, tucked beneath a canopy of embroidered angels, the scent of powdered rose lingering in the folds of your pillow. You should be resting. Instead, you're wide-eyed, blinking at the dark feeling, the itch of the day still buzzing beneath your skin. Because beneath every royal robe, every powdered wig, every laced bodice, and ceremonious nod, there was one consistent, unchanging reality: hygiene sucked. Your stomach churns faintly from tonight's honey-laced pigeon pie. The chamber pot across the room mocks you silently. You wonder if it's full. You decide you'd rather not know. In your youth, you imagined royalty meant luxury. Down pillows, golden hairbrushes, baths drawn with milk and honey. You got the pillows stuffed with feathers, sure, but also mites. You got the brushes ivory-handled and constantly shedding bristles. You got the baths monthly, and never alone. And yet here you are, still standing, still surviving. You remember the first time your brow bled from too tight tweezing. The first time you wept after a lead powder rash bloomed across your chest. The first time you realized that the crown didn't just weigh heavy on your head, it clogged your pores. Historians look back now and puzzle over it all. The iron-willed queens who ruled continents but never brushed their teeth. The duchesses who wore pearls sewn into gowns they never washed. The ladies of court who wept during their coronations, not out of joy, but from the sheer weight of the wigs. Some call it absurd, others barbaric. But you lived it, and you learned the art of stillness, the grace of holding your breath during a lice check, the courage it takes to wink at a prince while silently shifting a chafing thigh. You endured the mouse fur brows, the mercury balm, the vinegar rinses the split drawers, the scratchy linen soaked in shame. You endured it all, because that's what royal women did. They endured, not because they were pampered, but because they were expected to look like they had never suffered a day in their lives, even as they suffered every single one. Your fingers trace the edge of your night shift. It's soft now, worn thin. A small luxury, this comfort of cloth molded by time. You draw in a slow breath. Maybe tomorrow you'll skip the rouge. Just a little. Maybe you'll pretend to forget the perfume sachet. Maybe you'll let your real face show through for just a moment. Or maybe not, because even the worst hygiene, even the layers of grime and powder, the rituals and rot, they aren't just habits. They're armor. You've made it through the days of soot and sweat, through gossip and goose fat, through rituals more exhausting than war. And you are still here. The face may flake, the wig may slip, the linen may stain, but the legend she remains. The palace fades, now its towers dimmed, its corridors quiet. The distant clatter of heels on stone, the rustle of petticoats, even the quiet sighs of powdered courtiers all melt into silence. You are no longer balancing on aching ankles or holding your breath beneath corsets. You are not performing tonight. You are simply you. Feel the hush settle across your skin like a softer sort of linen one that doesn't itch or chafe. Imagine the powder drifting off the perfumes, fading gently into lavender-scented memory. Your scalp no longer itches. Your shoulders uncoil. Even your toes, cramped and forgotten for too many hours, begin to stretch and rest. And in that stillness, remember all those royal women, for all their rituals and restrictions, had quiet moments too. Moments like this. When the lights dimmed, the servants disappeared, and they were finally allowed to exhale. You are not in the palace anymore. You are in your own space, your own quiet world, and there are no expectations here. No rouge to reapply, no satin to straighten, just breath and stillness and sleep. So let the day dissolve. Let the powdered masks and lace-trimmed worries slip off one by one. You've heard their stories now. You've walked their halls. And now it's time to rest. Close your eyes. Let the night hold you. And let the centuries pass soft and slow.